there was no chance of escaping in Japan. Everybody was your enemy there. There was no chance. So you had to survive. And I sort of made it my point that I would always make sure that I'd do everything in my power to make sure I never got pneumonia. And because you had to work in certain places, you had to work in the clothes that you wore each day. And if you worked in the rain, you got soaking wet, you never had to change the clothes. And the guys, some of the guys at that time, they come home, they go to bed and they sleep in the same clothes and they're soaking wet. Mm. Well, I always made sure that I always changed. And that's why I say with my giggle coat, I reinforced it with a kilt to make it warm. I did everything in my power to make sure once I got back into camp, if I had anything really wet and run the risk of I could get pneumonia, I'd change. Mm. And I always had that feeling of I wanted to get back and run. Mm. Well, that was the thing I used to think about, you know. Mm. I'd like to could say I won a state championship, a state title, because I had got so close in the first ever 10 mile. I thought if I could do that without training, if I could get back home. And I think that was the bright side of it, to keep your mind occupied. When some guys dropped their bundle, and you could see them when they got sick, they sort of gave up. I was just the opposite. I was determined. Yes. And I'd always schemed to think about the next day of being able to get something to be able to eat. Yes. And keep myself alive. Yeah. It's a funny sort of feeling, but especially when you're in Japan, you couldn't work out how you're going to get out, and then to think that we were bombed and not killed. Yes. And got through that. But then again, we took a lot of risks. That I know were silly things I did. On the spur of the moment, you think about it, as I've always said to different people, it's not only a cat has 9 lives, because there's that many times I took a risk I shouldn't have done.
John, I did. Yeah, well John, thank you. It's been a real privilege to be able to talk with you. Yeah. I really appreciate it, and to be able to record it is just Peter. Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, as I say, Peter, there's that many things in my prison day life that when I originally had my book written, it was written by an American who wrote it, and it was so, it rubbished the Japanese so much, they wouldn't print it. The Australian government were going to print it, and the RSL, Veterans Affairs and the Institute of Sport were going to print it. But when they went through the manuscripts, they said it was rubbish and the Japanese too much, and it would spoil the trade with Japan. And that's what when I got in touch with the guy in charge of Institute of Sport, Ron Burns. Yes. Because Ron Burns was the one that got me to go to I was selected ahead of Keith Miller for the person that excelled the most in sport after I returned as a POW. Really? He got in touch with me and told me, he said, John, you rubbish the Japanese too much and you would spoil the trade with Japan. And
I'm sorry,